Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for dialing in for our special session at Feed 2022. So, this session is going to talk about sustainable urbanization for a healthier tomorrow. And we have a very special speaker amongst us today, Mr. Dheeraj Vadhva. So, I'm going to kindly invite him on stage and take all of you over the next 30 minutes. At Carrier, Dheeraj has been managing increasing responsibilities in HVAC businesses for the India region, for marketing and sales of commercial business in the India region, besides the overseas businesses as well. He simultaneously also engaged with nodal agencies to advocate for energy efficient built environment. Dheeraj brings amongst us a very rich experience of more than 2 decades. So it's an honor to be having you amongst us, sir. Just a very small tip for all the attendees. Please feel free and keep posting your questions for Mr. Dheeraj in the chat box you see on the right side of your screen. And we'll make sure he keeps getting your questions as and when you keep posting them. So over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Asha, for a nice introduction. And good evening, good morning, good afternoon, audience and friends who joined not only within India but also overseas. It's a pleasure for me to be a part of this, I should say, a flagship event. And thank you, Satish and Jen, from roping me in. And happy to see a lot of audience joining in this thought leadership program. What it does is, frankly, it helps us get a lot of ideas, a lot of inputs, and how we as an organization and individuals also contribute towards the cause what we are discussing today and we are meeting today. What I'll do is I'll take you through a few slides which helps us in understanding what are the mega trends what we see today, and how those mega trends now translate into the shift in the technology, and then thereof we see that how the standards and the labelings programs are moving in the country today. And overall, then we try and conclude and see that what is it that we see as an opportunity which helps us in doing our bit towards the larger cause which India as a country is committed to the world in decarbonization. And one of the major aspects what we see today is the urbanization aspect, wherein there's an opportunity also, there's a challenge also, but how do we find solutions around them is what we all are here for. So with this, I just move into the presentation piece. So I hope it is the slides are visible. And with that, I just first take over from a mega trends perspective. If you would like to look at the left-hand side of the slide, you will find that there's a significant rise in the middle class today. And when I say a significant rise in the middle class, how does that impact? It's almost, the middle class today stands at almost about 400 million in the country, and that's a significant chunk. What they do is they create a lot of pressure on the system to provide basic amenities towards healthcare, education, water, electricity, which translates and in a way leads to a lot of construction within the environment as a new construction, or we may look at the existing constructions to be upgraded. And mind you, this middle class is going to grow at a rate of close to about 8.5%, should we believe the reports what we go through in media. And that's again a lot of people moving into that category, which is going to be the spending power of the country. So with that background, not only that is what we see today, but with that, what will come around is a cooling demand going up significantly. Also, the ICAP report talks about that the demand is expected to grow by almost 8 times in the next 20 years. That's a significant amount of cooling requirement. And some of the areas which I touched upon as the sectors or the segments which will be growing in are healthcare, pharma, and we already see that government is putting a lot of focus and investments around the infrastructure. Besides that, what we also observe is the digitalization piece. I mean, what is important that we observe today in last few years, the shift what we have seen in our own habits, if we may look at that, all are buying, all are selling, all are needs around the commodities. We also see a lot of pieces around the digitalization. All our habits, banking, all our habits have now remained confined to our mobile phones, tabs, computers is what we are working on. How does that reflect? The reflect on the HVAC sector also very significantly. What we see that the air conditioning products as a design are no longer only mechanical equipments. Now they have moved from mechanical to electronics, and from electronics and the control systems to the data analytics. We'll speak and see more about it as I move forward. And when we see all these changes happening in terms of mega trends, we also see and we are concerned and we are together today to speak around the climate change. That's putting additional pressure on us from a global warming potential, what we see, and how we all can contribute towards lowering it. And decarbonization is one of the ways by which we can do it. We also see a major shift in customer expectation, user expectation between pre-COVID and post-COVID. And that is where we have to see that how can we come out with solutions, what we have today amongst us. India's commitment under the ICAP is to reduce about 20 to 25% of demand, cooling demand in next about 15 to 18 years time, what we see. And that is again a large value which we have to focus on, and how we can do it is what we'll see. With that, I also touch upon the potential what we see in terms of the increasing demand. So the challenge is double. One is we see the increasing demand in terms of the buildings and the segments coming up. And second is our commitment towards reducing the core cooling demand. So how we can do it is what we'll see. Moving from mega trends to buildings, the way we look at the buildings today is if you look at the global energy consumption, 40% of our energy goes inside the buildings is what we see as the reports say and tell us. The experiences also tell us the same piece, while the factories and the automobile sectors is where the balance of the energy goes in. And within these buildings, if we do a little deep dive, then we also see that the air conditioning systems are consuming almost an equal amount, which is 40% of what goes inside the building. So overall, 16% of the energy, of the global energy, is being consumed by the air conditioning systems inside the building. So that's again a significant area for us to work on and see how can we contribute towards it. And today, again, touching upon a bit of trend in terms of how we are looking at efficiency today, we have a lot of users, a lot of organizations who are already looking at certified green buildings today as one of the measures by which they can reduce the electricity consumption and contribute towards decarbonization. As I spoke about the digitalization, there is a lot of controls coming into play inside the air conditioning systems, whether they are residential products or commercial products. And through those controls, we are able to extract a lot of data, which helps us in optimizing the operations of the air conditioning systems and thus reduce the energy consumption and become more efficient. Third potential opportunity, what we have in front of us, which again is being focused by quite a few, is the existing setup or the existing inventory of the buildings, what we have in front of us. There lies the opportunity for us to look at the retrofit solutions. And as an organization, if Carrier has to look upon, we were able to do a large project in one of the hotel projects, wherein through the second and the third intervention, which is controls, data, and retrofit solutions, we were able to bring down the power consumption of one of the leading hotel in New Delhi by almost 1 million kilowatt hour a year. And this is measured and verified as well. And this is our contribution towards what we were able to achieve. And thereafter, we have done multiple such projects as an organization. This is not talking more from the organization perspective, but this is the potential opportunity we have from the existing buildings is what I'm trying to highlight. I spoke about the pre-COVID and the post-COVID era. The post-COVID era is also an era wherein we are seeing a lot of demand from our customers and the users coming in terms of how we can look at a better indoor air quality. And when we look at the better indoor air quality, then there is a lot of opportunity from air purification or filtration is where we can again contribute as air conditioning organizations. And again, we got an opportunity to work with one of the leading organizations within the government sector, which is the Energy Efficiency Services Limited. We have signed an agreement with them. We already have a letter of acceptance for them to work on multiple buildings over a period of time to see how we can improve the indoor air quality. So this is again one of the major shifts what we see. And then I'll try and connect that how does it impact the cooling demand and how does it impact the efficiency levels and how we can work towards improving it. from the trends which we see on the technology side and how the technology has upgraded over last so many years and how the user has shifted using the technology in terms of his or her behavior. We see a clear shift from the a fixed speed technology to a variable speed technology, whether these are residential products or light commercial products, or they are the heavy commercial products like chillers. Clearly, we see a shift that variable speed drives are being used in every kind of an equipment to get better efficiency from these equipments and reduce the power consumption. We also see a shift from unitary products to a central air conditioning products, again across applications, which give us advantages on operations, on part load efficiencies if we operate them on those load conditions. We also see one of the areas we have observed that awareness has helped the users to move from low temperature settings to a comfort level settings within the air conditioners what they use individually, and this is again contributing in a major way to reduce the power consumption. An area which is very close to my heart, frankly speaking, is the refrigerant piece. We see a shift again from CFC based equipments or HCFC based equipments. It is moving away now, and we have already moved to an HFC and HFO world. HFO is an area which is now getting introduced, and a lot of equipments are being developed by many manufacturers with HFO. And in times to come, we will see that these refrigerants, how do they help in moving towards the lower GWP refrigerants, which contribute again towards lowering the band around the efficiency levels and bringing the equipment to become better energy efficient. Also, simultaneously, these are the low GWP refrigerants as compared to the HCFCs and CFCs. There was a time when we used to see the user selecting equipments basis individual equipment efficiencies. Now the expectation, the design, the complete momentum has shifted to the solution-based approach. Every designer is working on around solution. Every user is demanding a solution-based approach instead of individual equipments, and that brings in the interesting topic of not only the indoor air quality, but also brings in the effectiveness of the controls and the data. And this is where we will see that in next 10 to 15 to 20 years, how the world shifts the efficiency levels from where we are to at least improving them by another 15, 20, 25% as well. First cost was something which we used to see few years back or maybe a lot of years back. Not today, but quite a few years back, the shift has now been towards cost of ownership is how we evaluate the buying decisions. And that's a major shift. When we look at the buying decisions on cost of ownership, we are cognizant of the operating cost, the maintenance cost as well. Last but not the least is the experimental interventions on controls has now moved clearly towards the IoT and the data analytics. And that is what is helping us to include more and more of controls inside the mechanical equipments under the air conditioning, which helps us in improving the efficiency of the system, not just the equipment. From mega trends to buildings to trends, now we sort of shift gears and look at how India as a country is moving towards more of regulations and how those regulations are helping us. If we have to look at those regulations today, we saw the energy labeling program first getting into the room air conditioner segment, which was, if I may remember well, close to about 10 years or maybe a little over 10 years back or around that time. That was the first product wherein the Bureau of Energy Efficiency worked around labeling them and regulating these products where the maximum opportunity we saw on bringing the efficiency band upwards. And thereafter, year on year, we have seen other products also getting introduced. While today, we see the duct-free splits and the chillers in the voluntary phase of the labeling program. We do have other product lines in the light commercial segment, which is a work in progress right now as we see. A lot of stakeholders from the industry, a lot of manufacturers are involved along with the government and the Bureau of Energy Efficiency to see that what is the right thing for us to do. And what we also observe in these last so many years, if we look at how the energy efficiency band has moved for us and how we have moved the needle up on efficiency levels when we have laid down these regulations or the star labeling programs, we clearly see the entrance level, the minimum energy efficiency level required to be a part of this labeling program has moved from a 2.3 ICER to a 3.1, which is a shift of 35% on the basic minimum efficiency requirement. But when we look at a five-star requirement, it has moved up by 45%. How do we stand against the global standards? If you look at, for example, Singapore, the MEPS for Singapore is around 3.3 against a 3.1 today, which is due for revision, which I believe now we should be somewhere closer when we revise next. So on global standards, we are there right now while we started late, but we are around there on the global standards when we come and look at the benchmark of the efficiency levels, what we have with us today. Now, this is more from regulations, which puts pressure on the manufacturers to come out with better efficiency equipments. What about the existing set of equipments, which is a much larger chunk for us today? How do we look at those equipments? Because what we do as a decision making when we decide that I want to buy a more efficient equipment, if I had bought an equipment in 2010, for example, if it lives its life, which I feel is its life, is by 8 or 10 years, I changed that AC for a better air conditioner in terms of efficiency. That old air conditioner does not go out of the system. It is still a load on my power grid. That means somewhere it is operating and putting load on the grid with an inefficient technology being still used. And this is an area wherein we have to think, how do we regulate or create a regulatory environment around decommissioning this existing pool of air conditioners, which is a large value or in terms of number of air conditioners operating out there. From there, we look at how do we look at creating an environment on incentivization as well. We are doing regulation. We are focusing on the existing set of old air conditioners, and we may look at how do we want to decommission them. We should also look at how do we encourage more and more users, whether it is a residential equipment or heavy commercial equipment like chillers. How do we look at encouraging and incentivizing them without causing much damage to the exchequer, frankly speaking? And that's where we try to create a sample calculation which may help us to understand the impact and what impact does it have on the environment, which is more important for us today is what we have to decide. On the left-hand side of the slide, if you see that the working is around the residential ACs, I will just take a minute and say that if we pick up only 3-star bands of air conditioners today, one is, these are residential air conditioners, one is 3-star fixed speed technology, one is 3-star variable speed technology, and the third one is 5-star variable speed technology. And they are today, as per the data available, what we see are respectively 50%, 40%, and 10% in terms of volumes being sold. Now, currently, the GST for air conditioners in this range happens to be at the highest bracket, that is of 28%. Now, if for a moment we think and assume that to encourage people to move more towards 5-star, 18% GST is what we would like to look at the 5-star inverter AC. Now, when we look at the number of people who are operating for 5-star inverter AC and respectively the balance 2, this 18% GST, that is a reduction, will at least shift the people from 10% to around 30%. That means an increase of around 20%. What does it do in terms of the savings around the electricity? You are able to save close to about 1.7 billion units of energy by doing this. What does it contribute, or how does it contribute towards the CO2 equivalent emission reductions? For 1.5 million tons of CO2 emissions getting reduced, and damage to the exchequer, that's about close to 250 CR. Now, this is, mind you, this is only one set of example which we have picked up from the entire lot of residential air conditioners. It depends how do we look at this data, how do we look at this information, and how do we try and push what we want to push and encourage people more towards buying a more energy efficient equipment. Likewise, if you look at the right-hand side, which is to do with the heavy commercial equipments which goes into the huge commercial buildings, we picked up one of the examples of a 300 tons, one screw chiller, and how does that reflect? So similar, likewise example, if we consider that The basic value of this chiller is basis our estimates moving from a 53 to a 63 lakhs per chiller, and then looking at what does it contributes to a GST if we lower from a 28 to 18%, and all looking at a 10 years of operation, 300 days of operation, 12 hours a day. How does it contribute towards the energy or the cost of ownership? The cost of ownership as a life cycle cost for 10 years moves from a 560 lakhs to a 482 lakhs per such chiller. That means an 80 lakhs trade benefit moving from a 3-star to a 5-star. Now, if I look at the data, what is available with us, close to about 270,000 uh, tons of chiller as a 350 ton category is what is there out. And if we consider close to about 30 to 50% of users shifting to a 5-star because of this benefit on GST, it contributes to a damage of around 15 crore to the exchequer by way of GST. That's a small nominal amount. And mind you, this is just one of the capacity points which we have picked up in the commercial segment. Now, the message from this slide is that we have to look at what is the benefit we are getting out of the reduction on carbon dioxide emissions at the cost of what exchequer is getting as reduced in terms of GST. And by the way, when we do this, the load on generation of as much power also comes down. The cost of generating that power comes down. So that's another advantage which we'll have to net off when we look at the damage to the exchequer. So overall, what we understand is that we do have a potential to work around this area also, other than what we saw earlier, where we can look at reducing the carbon emissions and contribute towards the cause. Last but not the least, I borrowed this chart from one of the LinkedIn posts, what we picked up from AEEE, and looked at how the energy efficiency has flowed down over the years post independence. While initially, when we got independence, then after that, the initial requirement was the energy demand to be met. From there, we moved on to the conservation piece to see that how do we ensure that everybody gets some bit of energy, some bit of power. From there, in 80s, we could see that productivity and energy management was the key word for us. And today, as we look into 2020s, efficiency and the economic recovery is what we are talking about from a post-COVID era level. And when we are talking about it, we are looking at sustainability of the built environment, sustainability of the environment, wherein we are looking at reducing the carbon emissions. And in last 75 years is what I just want to conclude out here for the slide is we have moved from a period wherein we had to meet the demands to a period wherein we are fueling our demands to the sustainable solutions. And this brings me to the last slide of my talk out here. How do we look at the situation today? Post-COVID, what is the impact on the buildings we observe? The demand for the improved indoor air quality has gone up significantly, and solutions being asked from the air conditioning manufacturers and designers is what we see as a shift. What it does when we have to look at more or better indoor air quality, then we have to pump in more of fresh air inside the buildings. What it does, it increases the tonnage requirement inside the building. Simultaneously, we are also having pressure from the climate side. We are observing the climate crisis today, and that is one of the areas we are trying to see that how do we look at reducing the global warming potential impact in the environment by way of refrigerants and by way of also reducing the energy consumption, manufacturing more and better energy efficient equipments. So if I try to look at both the situations together, what it brings as a conclusion to us is we need to look at efficiency in a very different way. We have to have a balanced approach between the new energy efficient equipments, look at the existing set of equipments and how do we decommission them if they have gone below certain efficiency levels. We have to also look at uh, various advantages we can get through the new changing mega trends around IoT and data analytics by way of controls. How do we improve the efficiency further beyond the individual equipment levels? And this helps us to understand the complete scenario that this is not going to be a one individual organization's job, but a collective job between various stakeholders from the policymakers to the manufacturers to the users to the designers, all coming together and working together to see that we work towards a cause of reducing the carbon emissions and thus build our habitat as a sustainable habitat. Last but not the least, what is important for us to also remember that India has got a commitment towards the global world that we will reduce our carbon emissions by close to about 1 billion tons by 2030. We also have a commitment that we will become net zero carbon emissions by about 2070, which is another 50 years from now. Whether we live for next 50 years or not, whether I live for next 50 years or not, that's a different aspect. But if I live and if we all live, what we would like to hear from the generations to come is that 50 years back, there was a generation who worked towards or who made an effort towards to see that future generations live in a better habitat. With that, thank you so much. I come to the end of my presentations and open for any questions.
Sir, we have a question from Mr. Bhaskar Natarajan. He says that have you considered selling carbon credits for the five-star ACs? If yes, what is your experience? And if not, have you faced any challenges?
Not yet is what I can say.
I think then with this, we come to the end of our session, Mr. Dheeraj. Thank you so much for being amongst us today. Very quickly, for the audience that has joined us in for this session, I request all of you to now head back to the lobby, enter the auditoriums, and join us for the last session of Feed 2022. That will be a very short thank you session with Dr. Satish, Director President of AEEE. So can we please have all of you log into the next session now? We'll start in another 2 minutes sharply. That is 4:30. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Afsha, for the opportunity, and thank you, audience, for being patiently listening to me. Appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Really a pleasure.